Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. The purpose of today's webinar is going to be to provide an update on the latest COVID-19 guidance, including our isolation and quarantine requirements, some new ARPA projects recently approved by the Board of Supervisors, with some upcoming economic recovery resources, and then of course an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. Today we're going to have Dr. Kasire and Nick Morey provide an update from our public health office, and then EMD is going to provide an update as well. If you want to go ahead and kick us off, Dr. K, that would be fantastic.
Good morning, everyone. So a quick update on the numbers, and these are from yesterday. We haven't gotten today's updates yet. We are 250,811 cases of COVID-19 reported. We are averaging about 2,500 cases per day, and our case rate is at 161 per 100,000. This has dropped quite a bit. Last Friday, the case rate was at 199. And so this does show that our numbers are beginning to decline. And this is a pattern that is being observed throughout California as well. With the deaths, we are at 2,646. And we are seeing a bit of an uptick with the deaths, which was something that we were anticipating because there's usually a lag with the deaths. The hospitalizations, we're at 657 with 98 in the intensive care unit. These are the highest numbers that we have seen for hospitalizations, but still compared to how high our case rate went, this does show what we've been talking about the Omicron variant being milder. But I think the hospital numbers do show that even though it is milder, it can still be a very serious disease, especially for people that are not vaccinated or have not received their booster. Our priorities remain being able to work with communities to provide vaccine, and also continue to support our testing sites, and also support the jail and long-term care facilities with the outbreaks. With that, I'll turn it over to Nick to give an update on the state orders and masking. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. As I'm sure you're aware, we've had a local masking order in place since July, and that remains in effect. And the state did issue a statewide masking order, which really didn't have a big impact on us locally because we already had that local order. But initially that was in place from December 15th through January 15th. They've since extended it through February 15th, and no news yet if it would be extended further. The state has issued some other orders specific to for vaccination requirements for different professional groups, and they recently extended the deadline for boosters on that, mostly to account for the fact that the most recent Omicron surge has created some challenges for folks who may have needed to get a booster, either because of COVID infection or being able to access availability, as many workforce or the workforce in general was impacted by this most recent surge. Also, I'll just say a couple quick words on schools, just because I'm sure we have a few folks who are parents in attendance. Schools were, like everyone else, impacted by the surge coming out of the winter break. The timing was obviously pretty awful in terms of schools coming out of break right as the surge was hitting. So we definitely saw an increase in cases amongst students and staff at schools, which aligns with what we're seeing community-wide. And I think the worst of that is behind us, as schools are reporting improvements on that front. But there is a commitment from the state level all the way down to counties and the school districts to keep schools open, and they've largely been very successful in doing so. And there has been a bit of a transition at the school level in terms of how they track cases, moving from an individual level contact tracing model more of a group level model. And as Dr. Kasiri mentioned, we are continuing to promote vaccination, and we do that with the school populations as well. I think I'll stop there.
Great, thanks, Nick. We really appreciate that. And just a reminder to everyone, if you do want to ask questions as we go, please feel free to do that in the Q&A down below. All right, so now we're going to be moving on to our EMD office with Marie, Ginny, and Rolando, who are going to provide some updates on our COVID-19 guidance and our new retail food fee waiver program. You want to take it off, Marie?
Sure, thanks, Crystal. I'm Marie Wooden. I'm the director for the Environmental Management Department. And one of the programs, we have multiple programs, 34 environmental programs that we implement and enforce in Sacramento County. But one that we're going to be highlighting after we do the guidance is the retail food industry group. So you know that they've been very challenged and hard hit and still are struggling through this pandemic. But we do have some good news. We'll go ahead and do the guidance documents first, as the agenda states, and then we'll go into the ARPA project. ARPA means American Rescue Plan Act, that the federal government, Biden's administration, passed and allocated, I would say, millions, trillions of dollars to help the economy and help basically the American people to recover from this pandemic. And there's a multifaceted type of programs out there, but the one that, again, that we will talk about is economic recovery for the retail food industry. But with that, I have with me Jania Monasterio. She is the division chief for environmental health, where this retail food program and other recreational health and myriad other programs reside. And also Rolando Villarreal, he's the deputy chief in the environmental health division. So with that, Jania, do you want to go ahead and give up the updates? There's been a lot of changes since Omicron has appeared here in the US. Go ahead, Jania.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. As Marie said, my name is Jania Monasterio. I'm with the Environmental Health Division. So this morning, I'm going to be going over some guidance documents that we have created in conjunction with Public Health. We've partnered with them to come up with some guidance that helps explain and put it in easier terms to understand a lot of the requirements or recommendations coming from the various agencies, Cdph, CDC, State of California, Sacramento County. So the first one that I want to go through is what's called the Beyond the Blueprint reference chart. All the guidance that I will be talking about is or can be found on our website, so it can be downloaded there for easy reference. I do want to say that we all know that this guidance and recommendations, they change, and they change regularly, and they seem to change a lot. So keep coming back to our website, keep checking there for the newest versions. We do our best to keep up with them as quickly and as fastly as possible so that we can make sure that what's on there is the most current guidance. In addition, we make sure that there are links and there are resources available. So as we summarize them and try to put them in easier to understand language, we also link to the actual original document so that you can refer back to the original what has been published from those various agencies. So I'm going to go through the Beyond the Blueprint guidance document. On this guidance document, we have on the first page is just basically the major changes or major items that are going on within our community, our area. Nick had mentioned the public health orders. This outlines the 2 public health orders that are currently in effect for Sacramento County. The first one is a July 29th order, which requires masking indoors for all individuals. And then the second one is a January 6th public health order that requires public meetings to be held virtually, and then also recommends that businesses do the same. Cdph also has a public health order for masking indoors, regardless of vaccination status. And so those 2 are at the same time. And then also mega events. And that is one of the bigger requirements in the state of California in terms of what's required for mega events, indoor and outdoor. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and move into the guidance documents, and we'll come back to mega events. So the way that this document is set up is that it has a table of contents that links quickly to the section that you would be wanting to look at or to review. So as you can see, the guidance document is about 33 pages long, so it's quite lengthy. And so navigating through it and trying to scroll will take some time. So if there's a section that you'd like to look at, it moves quickly right to that section. The first part of it, the first few pages, talks about the public health orders, as I just mentioned, the 2 from Sacramento County, and then there's 3 additional from the state of California. The 3 from California here on the section is for visitors in acute healthcare settings, long-term care settings, adult care facilities, direct care worker vaccine requirements, and healthcare worker vaccine requirements. So if any of those sections would be of interest, you would just click on it and it will take you directly to it. And you can read a summary to that, what that guidance is about. And then also it has links to the actual or the original document. So you can read the entire public health order in its full effect. So what I'm going to do is jump to the Cdph isolation and quarantine guidance. So just clicking on it, it takes us to page 10. And then this is a summary of this guidance from Cdph. All of our guidance is oriented this way on this reference chart, where the middle column talks about the summary and gives highlights. And then over on the right side, maybe we'll give the link so that you can go to the actual document or supporting documents such as FAQs or other supporting documents that helps reference what's inside that guidance. So looking at the isolation and quarantine guidance, this is from Cdph. And this dovetails into what we're going to go into next, which is the California OSHA ETS Emergency Temporary Standards Guidance. And that has to do with what to do when workers need to isolate or quarantine if they're COVID positive or they've been exposed. So Cdph recommends or requires that any individuals who test positive for COVID-19, they need to isolate, stay home for 5 days. Isolation can end after 5 days if symptoms are resolving and there's a negative test result. If an individual is unable to test or chooses not to test, then they need to continue to isolate through day 10. If there are symptoms, if there's a fever, those need to resolve. It's also recommended to wear a well-fitting mask for a full 10 days and wear a full-fitting mask for a full 10 days. The second scenario is people who are exposed to COVID-19, but they are vaccinated. Let me go back. People who are exposed to someone with COVID-19, they need to quarantine. Now in this scenario, these individuals are either unvaccinated or they're vaccinated, but they haven't received their booster. They're eligible for booster, but they have not received it. These individuals need to stay home for 5 days after the last contact with the person with COVID-19, test on day 5, and they can end a quarantine after day 5 if they no longer have symptoms and have a negative test result. Again, if unable to test or chooses not to test, then to quarantine for full 10 days and wear a mask for those full 10 days. If a positive test is received, then they need to follow the isolation guidance in the previous section. Nuance to this is that in a workplace setting, if that employee who's been exposed, who's unvaccinated and is not boosted but eligible for a booster, is asymptomatic, they can return to work after 3 to 5 days of exposure, provided that they're asymptomatic and they wear a mask for 10 full days. So that allows for returning to work a little bit earlier. The third scenario in the Cdph guidance for isolation and quarantine are for those who are exposed and they are vaccinated and they are boosted, meaning that if they're booster eligible, if they're not booster eligible, then that would fall into this category as well. So these individuals do not need to quarantine, but it is recommended that they test on day 5 and they wear a mask for a full 10 days. If they do develop, if they test positive, then they need to go back up to the isolation requirements and isolate for that time period is recommended. So we found in our agency that a lot of this is case by case. So referring to this flow chart is very helpful as each of these cases come up. So it's really looking at vaccination status and then looking at when there was exposure and then needing to get test results. So referring to the actual guidance from Cdph, and this is the link to it right here, is very helpful in going through each of those steps and understanding where an individual needs to isolate or quarantine and for how long. Okay, so the next section, we talk about beyond the blueprint. And this is the model that the state of California currently is in. So this is the next step after the color tier system that we saw previously. The color tier system put restrictions on businesses in terms of the capacity businesses could have, and then also had physical distancing requirements. So those are no longer in effect. So it's the end of that color tier system, no physical distancing and no business capacity. So these are a few links in here that really help out with understanding beyond the blueprint, what the frequently asked questions, what comes next, and this is all after June 15th. Okay, moving into California Emergency Temporary Standards. So this is a very, very short summary of the entire requirements. Referring to the Cal OSHA ETS and their frequently asked questions is the best way to really understand what needs to happen at the individual businesses. What we did here was summarize the basic and the highlights of them and then provided all of the resources. So the actual ETS is here, resources webpage, FAQs. These FAQs are very helpful. They outline just a ton of scenarios. That's very helpful. In addition to, this is the complaints line, and then calling Cal OSHA's consultation line is also very helpful. So then the emergency temporary standards were put into place or became effective on January 14th. And in there are some requirements for isolation and what's called exclusion requirements. And that's if someone tested positive or has a close contact. However, due to the executive order from the governor, since Cdph has guidance out there, that supersedes. So the guidance from Cdph supersedes anything that's in Cal OSHA at this time while it's in effect. So be aware that you will need to refer to Cdph's guidance for exclusion periods, even though Cal OSHA does have some requirements. In the meantime, the Cdph are the ones that are superseding the Cal OSHA ones. Some of the big changes in the Cal OSHA ETS is face coverings. This is one of their larger changes. And they became very clear of what a face covering or an acceptable face covering is. So a face covering includes a surgical mask, a procedure mask, a respirator worn voluntarily, or a tightly woven fabric or non-woven material of at least 2 layers. So the key is 2 layers. They did add on here that covers that do not let light pass through and held up to a light source. And the FAQs go into detail of what that means exactly. The cover or the face cover needs to cover the nose and mouth and secure to the head with ties, ear loops, elastic bands that go behind the head. If gaiters are worn, they need to have 2 layers of fabric, or they need to be folded to make those 2 layers. The face covering is a solid material without slits, holes, or punctures, fit tightly over the nose, mouth, and chin, and no large gaps outside the face. And then they also include what a face covering does not include. So turtleneck collar, single layer of fabric, baklava, ski mask, scarf. So that way it's very clear what a face mask or a face covering does not include. And keep in mind, these requirements are all coming from Cal OSHA, and this is in the workplace. Fully vaccinated employee, this is also a definition that has changed. And they added in here of giving some clarification of the time difference between the first and second dose. And so that is clear. And so that's in the second part here, received no earlier or received earlier than 17 days after the first dose. So wanted to be clear of the difference between the 2 doses. Much of the rest of the guidance here from the ETS for Cal OSHA is similar to what it was in the previous revision. Vaccination status, when that is required, of keeping records confidential, and how they can, or how the employer can maintain those records. And then linking the face coverings to the Cdph guidance for face coverings. There are face covering exemptions in the workplace: alone in a room or vehicle, while eating and drinking, wearing a respirator, having a mental or health condition that makes it difficult or would not be appropriate for a person to wear a face covering, and then tasks where a face covering really cannot be performed. Employers must provide COVID training and provide a COVID prevention plan. They must put one together. And then we talked about the return to work for the isolation and quarantine requirements. So this links it to Cal OSHA's requirements there, and this is when employees can return to work. Another big change in the ETS is testing, and testing must be offered to employees at no cost and at paid time off. So that's a new change or something that's been made very clear. employees need to be trained, and they're testing about their rights, about testing and having those exclusion periods and pay for those exclusion periods. One of the last big changes, the employer or the telework professional must observe an at-home test. And so the definition of a COVID-19 test also changed, which included now this requirement that at-home tests, which are self-administered and self-read tests, do need to be verified or observed by a telehealth professional or by the employer. And it's important to refer to Title 8 section for that in the FAQs, where they can give more information in terms of what that means and what that means for the employer. Okay, the next section is about the California Department of Public Health guidance for face coverings. And so, as Nick had mentioned before, the guidance for face coverings has increased through February 15, 2022. So that is continually being assessed, so that in terms of expanding or extending that requirement. Okay. The next section is Cdph face covering guidance. So this links to the guidance for the use of face coverings, and these are exemptions for that Cdph has put out there for the use of face coverings. So persons younger than 2 years old, people with a medical condition, those are who are hearing impaired or communicating with the person who's hearing impaired, and wearing a mask would create a risk to a person doing their work. Okay. The next section is choosing safer activities. And these are CDC recommendations for safer activities. So depending on the risk level that each individual has, it's important that individuals look at what their risk level is and what would be appropriate for them to do. So choosing those safer activities are important, whether it's outdoor activities or if their risk level is low enough that they can do activities with other individuals or in spaces where there's more people. So it's important. So this actually is a great document for CDC recommendations for safer activities. And you can kind of look it through there and see what kind of things are recommended. The next section talks about mega events. So we have indoor mega events and outdoor mega events. Indoor mega events is greater than 500. These are indoor activities such as conventions, conferences, expos, sporting events, concerts. And it's required for indoor mega events that individuals show proof of vaccination and or a negative test result prior to entry. Before December or beginning December 1st, those over 18 need to show proof of identification. And then if there isn't a vaccination status, they need to provide at least a test result within 2 days of the event taking place. Event operators do need to provide information, display it prominently, and cover and follow Cdph face covering guidance. Outdoor mega events are events that are outdoors that have greater than 5,000 people in attendance. These are music, food festivals, car shows, large endurance events such as marathons, parades, sporting events, and concerts. And so in these events that it's not required to show proof of vaccination, but it's highly recommended. It's strongly recommended to do that. And it would follow all of the same guidelines and the same recommendations in terms of displaying information and providing masks and having individual show identification. This section talks about additional recommendations for sponsors of mega events, gives some recommendations on things that these sponsors can do to help further mitigate the spread of COVID-19. For special community events, Sacramento, our environmental management department, what we've done is we've created a community events and gathering application. Here's a link to it. We also have a telephone number for questions, but we provide a free service for any operators or any coordinators of these mega events. If they have any questions on how to put on this event safely, we provide the service that we'll work with them and help them with guidance, help them get information, help them plan their event so that it can be put on safely. So this is something that we offer. And again, it is free. We don't charge for this, and that will definitely work with those coordinators and help them put on the event. Okay, so bars, restaurants, breweries, and distilleries, there's no longer any requirements for capacity or operations in terms of outdoor versus indoor. All of that can resume as normal. But we do have some guidance here from the ABC Alcoholic Beverage Control. They do have regulatory relief. They're on their 9th notice of regulatory relief. There are some assembly bills that have gone into effect that allow for off-sale liquor license and sales, for to-go containers, and then also for expanding their footprint and having outdoor dining. So these are links to those to get more information about those, that information. And then also we have a link here for outdoor dining for the county. For Sacramento County does have a use permit, has an FAQ, and has an application package. Different jurisdictions for the different cities would need to contact the planning departments for those areas to see if there are any requirements for the different cities. There is one more public health order that is not in the beginning of the guidance document. It's more towards the end because it relates to schools. So this is vaccine verification for workers in schools. This summarizes what that requirement is and then links to the actual public health order. Okay, we do have a section for schools in terms of isolation and quarantine for schools, and then links to all of the various guidance documents in terms of what is it for K-12 school testing strategies and American Pediatrics. So there's additional information there and talks about what those isolation and quarantine recommendations are for staff and students. The next section talks about childcare programs, and this links to Department of Social Services and guidance for childcare providers. Next section is places of worship. We do have a specific guidance document for places of worship. This links to it, and it largely takes in this information and pulls it into one easy to read document for places of worship, and then gives some recommendations in terms of how to keep the environment from spreading and mitigating the spread of COVID-19. So this is the actual specific document, and it links to here, and it's also on our website as well. The next section talks about youth sports. And so there is some guidance for youth sports in terms of testing and what types of sports would need to have masks versus not have masks. And we continually update this section because it is something that has changes and is constantly evolving. So we do link to the various face coverings, Q&A considerations for youth sports, etc. The next section is performing arts. Just like places of worship, we have a specific guidance document for performing arts, and it gives some specifics in terms of how to safely put on these events. Have a link for vaccine testing and vaccination requirements, and vaccine requirements in the workplace, about showing vaccines, proof of vaccination, what would be those recommendations of what appropriate documentation is for showing proof of vaccine. Have a link for the Vaccinate Sacramento, still promoting vaccines in Sacramento. And then last is a travel advisory. And so this is a travel advisory upon returning to California to test within 3 to 5 days upon arrival, and then should follow CDC travel guidance. Okay. And that's a summary of all of the guidance that's on here. I did want to show that this is at the very end, we do have a listing of all of the changes and the dates the changes are made. So as you're navigating through this, if you have an older version, please check our website. You can always look at the last page to see if you're still on the right version or if there's a new version and what has changed from the one that you saw last and what new things have been added to the guidance. And with that, the other document that I wanted to show is a workplace checklist for Osha requirements. I won't go through this document. It's more specific than what's on that reference chart, and it goes into more specifics for workplace for the for Osha requirements. Again, it's not the entire regulation, and so it's best to reference that in its entirety for all the specifics, but this gives a basis for what is required, and then also provides a checklist for for workplace and workers. So this allows the workplace to kind of go through and say, okay, these are the main points that I need to hit, and then it can delve into the regulations for more specific requirements as needed. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was mega events. We talked about the specifics of mega events. I just wanted to turn it over to Rolando if he wanted to say anything about the application process. And there you go, Rolando.
Yeah, thank you, Jania. Yeah, so we are continuing to review COVID protocols for mega events. What I'd like to do is invite you to fill out a mega event application if you have any questions or concerns regarding any COVID protocols for your event. So, and that's about it for events. Thank you.
Thank you, Rolando. And unless there's anything else, Marie, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Does anyone have any questions for, I know this was a lot of information Jania covered.
A lot.
But, you know, we don't expect you to retain it all, but the document is very helpful. So later, if you have questions, you can refer to this document and it will lead you to other information. And our department continues to support public health because we do regulatory type of work with businesses. This is a service that we're providing to support the businesses in this pandemic. A lot of messaging, creating documents, trying to break it down because the state documents can be rather lengthy, maybe a little bit more difficult to understand. So our mission, our goal, what we try to do is break it down so you guys can all understand it, or a small operator to a large operator can understand it better. So anyway, if anyone has any questions, like Crystal said, you can always put them in the chat. June did send out the link to the Beyond the Blueprint. We call it the Beyond the Blueprint framework. And like Jania said, it is changing, you know, so hopefully when Omicron, as Dr. Kasirier said, once it starts going back down, then the state will reevaluate the orders that they have put out there, and then hopefully it will adjust again. So, and then hopefully we won't have any more, I can hope, these testy variants that come around, and it will just go more to an endemic phase. With that, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the ARPA project, the Retail Food Industry Fee Waiver. So on January the 11th, and Crystal, go ahead and chime in anytime because I don't know all the specifics, I just know our portion. So on January 11th, it was presented to the Board of Supervisors. It's called Phase 1 Funding Allocations for the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And within this Phase 1, the strategic, they call it a strategic investment, there's 3 categories: housing and homeless, health, and economic response. So our department fell into the economic response category. And one of the ARPA projects that we put forth, working with economic development, they were super helpful, was the Retail Food Industry Fee Waiver. So the ARPA project, what it stated was that the retail food industry businesses that were active as of December 31st, 2021, they would receive a fee waiver to their, that they pay for basically their food permit that they have. And these can range from snack bars, cottage food, a restaurant, a bar, a brewery, I mean, food truck. There was some exemptions. There were temporary events did not apply. So like if you were a food vendor, just a temporary event, that one did not qualify. And if you were a grocery store, 15,000 square feet or greater, that did not qualify either. Those were like the big box stores. I don't know, Jania and Rolando, help me out. Are those like the Costco, the bigger, pardon, Rolando?
Rayleigh's.
Yeah, so a grocery store could, some of the Rayleigh's could qualify, but if you reach that 15,000 or more, they did not qualify. So in all, the project was $6,820,000 and it started this month in January, and it will go to the end of the year, December 31st. So we do a billing cycle once a month, and what they will get on their invoice is basically, it says 0. We cannot use the funding for any back fees owed. It's just for their permit for this year. And Crystal, I know you can give more information on the whole pie of the America Rescue Plan Act, how much money Sacramento County got, but this was just one project that was approved by the board. Jania, do you want to add anything to what I said, or Rolando?
No, Marie, you did a great job summarizing. It's a great program. It'll provide relief to the retail food industry. We're real excited about it. So we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from businesses that they're very happy to be able to receive this fee waiver for 2022.
Crystal, do you want to add anything about the American project in whole?
Yeah, and I'll go over a few of our other projects as well. Thank you, everyone. That was a really great update on some of the new guidance. And like Marie said, it is linked there, but you can always email us directly if you have trouble locating something specific that you're looking for. So I'll go ahead and jump in with a little bit more of an overview of the economic response items that were approved by the board on January 11th and this past Tuesday on January 25th. So a little bit of background, if you've not been familiar, we have a lot of people on this call that have been in other meetings, but just to be clear, the board did approve funding projects for the first year of installments on the 11th. The county's full amount from the ARPA allocation was approximately $301 billion. And of that, 19.8 million has been allocated towards economic response efforts. So we have a total of 8 large projects that the board has approved. And of course, you've heard the first one, which is our retail food industry fee waiver. We've also got coming up and not fully formulated yet. And so we don't have quite as much detail as Marie has, but we are going to be doing $7.5 million for direct grants to our small business and nonprofit community. In addition, we're going to be partnering with the city of Sacramento and doing arts and nonprofit cultural grants in the amount of $2 million, and they will match that with an additional minimum $2 million. That's coming up. And then we've also partnered with 3 what we're calling business service support providers, and that's going to be the Sac Metro Chamber, the Sac IEDC, and our Sac County Burke team. In addition, we've got grants that are going to be going directly to our chambers of commerce and our PBIDs. Now, that's a piece I know a lot of you want to hear about specifically because several of you are on this call. So I'll go into a little bit of that now. On the 11th, the board did approve funding for our unincorporated county PBIDs in the amount of $50,000 each, and the unincorporated county and underrepresented community chambers of commerce in the amount of $25,000 each. Now, on this past Tuesday, January 25th, the board used a portion of their district ARPA allocations. If you've been keeping track, the board has taken $5 million each that they hope to provide to specific needs that represent their own districts from the ARPA funding. And what they did was these allocations were approved to go into the unincorporated county to create a surplus for what was already given on the 11th, but also to fund some of the chambers of commerce and PBIDs that reside within the incorporated cities that are in their districts. Now, these approvals were done verbally, and so we've gotten a lot of questions about what's next. And so what we're doing is we've updated all of the budgets and the tables. They're now with the board's office to make sure that everything that they verbally approved is like they thought. As soon as that is back to us, we're going to be sending out notice of awards through email to all of the PBIDs and all of the chambers and the exact amounts and what our next steps will be for contracting and eligible uses. We want to keep the eligible uses pretty broad. Anything that the federal government has allowed, we're probably going to stick with. Regranting is not allowed, but anything that dates back to a receipt that has been accumulated as of March 3rd, 2021, for any activities that are COVID related, those will be able to apply. So we'll be reaching out to everyone directly soon on that, but you're welcome to email our office if you have any questions on that. In addition, I will put in the chat the link to that meeting if you'd like to watch it. It was a lengthy one and it was in the evening, but we're happy to answer any questions that you guys throw in the chat now or at a later date as well. That's all we've really got for ARPA updates now. Marie, can you confirm, will you guys be hosting another webinar just for the restaurant community to talk more about the fee waiver program?
Yes, we're going to be working with the Business Environmental Resource Center, Burke. And we will be hosting a webinar specifically for that retail food industry group. And we will be sending that information out. Jania put in the chat the where you can find the links for the information. It's on our website. We have FAQs there. We're creating a flyer to send out, and we will have, like I said, a specific webinar just for retail food. So Vera, hopefully that answers your question. Go to that link. We'll be sending more information out. When we do the webinar for the retail food industry group, we record it. So because we know they're working hard, they don't necessarily can jump on the webinar, but at least we'll send the info out so they can watch it later when they have time. So that's the way we've done them before in the past. And we'll probably hold more specific group webinars. Crystal mentioned the performing arts. So we've already been doing webinars with that group, and they're very appreciative. We'll probably do another one just to give them the updates. They're a very conscientious group, and they need the updates to all this guidance themselves, and they'll be probably happy to learn that there's a grant out there for their group. So anyway, are there any more questions for Crystal? Sorry, Crystal, I guess you do the Q&A now.
No, it's okay. One more thing I did want to add, and yes, we will be having webinars on all of these programs, especially as we start to release the larger grant programs for the small business community. We'll be having training webinars on how to apply, the best way to submit application. We want to keep these applications brief and concise. We understand that a lot of our small businesses have had to apply for a lot of different programs and loans, so we want to make sure that we're not adding to the massive amounts of paperwork, but we've got to make sure that we follow all those federal guidelines. But right now, we do have upcoming a different program that I just wanted to touch on real quick before we close, and that's going to be the Micro Business Grant Program. So the county has received $1.9 million from the state to provide direct grants to our micro business community throughout the entire county, so incorporated cities and unincorporated area. It's very specific numbers. We're going to be providing 669 businesses, each with $2,500. The qualifications are pretty basic. There's only like 5 of them. You have to be in business prior to December 31st, 2019. You have to be currently active with a business license. When we say micro business, it is very micro. They have to have less than $50,000 in revenues, and then fewer than 5 full-time employees. We're planning on kicking off the open application period on April 1st, and we have partnered with 4 of our local CBOs, California Capital, the Sacramento Chamber, SEC IEDC, and the Cal Hispanic Chamber. We want to make sure that we provide very good in-language support to our microbusiness community, and we get the word out everywhere. So that one is upcoming as well. I know some of you have heard about that. You're going to see that one advertised more in the coming days. And just to clarify, you can apply to that program and you'll still be able to apply to the other grant programs that the county is going to be having through our ARPA funds. We're not going to prevent anyone from crossing over on those. So that's some really good news that we're happy about and excited. It's been a work in progress. But again, feel free to email. Oh, I see a question now. Microgrants only to unincorporated areas? No, microgrants will be countywide, so incorporated areas as well. Our first $7.5 million for the small business grants and nonprofits, that will be unincorporated only. Keep in mind, this is our first year, phase 1 of funding. So if economic response is identified as a priority from the Board of Supervisors for year 2, and we're able to do more grants, we do hope that we're able to open up where we're able to provide those grants too. But that is where it's at for now. All right, so we don't have anything else from our chat. Do our panelists have anything else to offer up before we close today? All right, everyone, thank you so much. We appreciate everybody's time from our business community and our business in general. We know that this is a lot that's been going on here lately, and so we want to make sure that we are here to provide support whenever you need. I think at this point, you have a lot of our email addresses directly, and we're just available whenever you guys need. So please reach out. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close.